Hello there. My name is Luna, and this is the I'm Here podcast. It's been a while, as usual, because we take care of ourselves here. A lot has changed because we value the ever unfolding exploration of life. I legally changed my name recently to Luna Melody Harlow. And I came out as transgender. I am gender fluid. I use they, them pronouns primarily. Once in a while, she, her. And very, very occasionally, he, him. I moved to Vancouver, the land of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam peoples. And we are on quite the journey of discovery and exploration. But today's podcast is totally different. It is a school project. It is highly educational and about the practice of Buddhism. It is now October, and this is a project for my summer school class. So that just says a lot about where we're at mentally, that things have been quite a whirlwind. And I am so grateful for my school that understands that life is heavy and takes a toll on us. So, though this isn't a particularly personal podcast today, Buddhism is my ultimate aspiration, and what great teachers they are, as well as Indigenous spirituality, which is the heart of my degree, Indigenous studies and interreligious studies. So I find those two practices, worldviews, and entire ways of seeing the world are my mentors, and I couldn't imagine studying anything else, because these ways of life are who I aspire to be, and they make me more whole and more present. So I'm very delighted to share with whatever listeners parts of what I have been learning and that have completely transformed my life. So let's dive in. Before that, something important to say is education is a privilege, yet education is also a right. And education is not the end goal here. Education is the catalyst for advocacy and the catalyst for change. I learn in order to act. And Bo Burnham said, white people and privileged people see learning or social change as through the myopic lens of their own self-actualization. And I do not learn about Buddhism and Indigenous spirituality merely to make myself a better person. Absolutely not. The purpose of learning and listening is to apologize and then to take that privilege of education and to act and to change. Because the reason I have done absolutely nothing for this white middle class privilege, and so I must take all of that and throw it back into capitalism's face, racism's face, homophobia's face, and do everything I possibly can with this privilege to advocate and be a proper ally. And yeah, it's all about action, and it is not at all about my own nirvana, my own self-actualization. And I think that is extremely important, that we, for the listeners here today and for myself, we don't just become a glutton for learning and a glutton for reading, and so that you have a very big head but very weak arms for action. That do shit, do something. So Buddhism, this quote by Stephen Prothero summarizes Buddhism in both a succinct way and shows why I love Buddhism so much. In short, be kind, be wise, be mindful. And that quote is going to be the guiding phrase for this podcast and how I break down Buddhism for us today. But in long, let's go. There are 4 noble truths in Buddhism. I am particularly intrigued by the 4th one that says, there is a path to the goal of nirvana. It's also known as the Eightfold Path. And these 8 steps can be divided into 3 categories: ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. Does that sound familiar? Be kind, be wise, and be mindful. Why are we learning about being kind, being wise, and being mindful? Because, according to Prothero, they are like the center, and around that comes the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path is a winding road to nirvana. And that is the 4th noble truth of Buddhism. Being kind, being wise, and being mindful is one's road to nirvana. So, since these 3 things are so important, let's look into them, shall we? So I'm going to divide this podcast into 3 parts: into kindness, into mindfulness, and into wisdom. So first, let's talk about kindness, otherwise known as ethical conduct. So Buddha's reading recommendation for kindness is the discipline of morality. The Buddha has 3 main teachings or books on these 3 categories. So for each of them, I will say a little reading recommendation. And let's do an Eightfold Path pause and review the 3 steps in the Eightfold Path that fall under the category of kindness. So ethical conduct is the first category in the Eightfold Path. And under that is the right view or understanding, having the right intention or thought, and having the right speech. The Eightfold Path are like, 8 steps that one takes to nirvana. So those are the ethical parts. And to flesh this out a little bit more, the quotes that I'm going to be taking to teach you about them are not things that I have found, but authors from Buddhism that I look up to and that are well known. So for this section, I am taking from Thich Nhat Hanh and the Dalai Lama. Thich Nhat Hanh translates and comments on the Heart Sutra, and that is a short poem by the Buddha that contains really essential teachings on Buddhism. Here's a quote for you. To be or not to be, that is no longer the question. The question is one of interbeing. You cannot just be by yourself alone. You have to interbe with every other thing. The concept of interbeing is mind-blowing to me and transformative because in this society of individualism that I live in, it's very much about me being independent and my own self and my own identity. But interbeing is a new term that I've come across because of Thich Nhat Hanh, which I am certainly mispronouncing their name, so sorry. And yeah, interbeing is this coexisting and describes this interconnectedness with everything that is core to Buddhism. And then in a completely different way of describing this, yet all related, you are empty of a separate self, but you are full of the cosmos. So emptiness is an expression that we would say is equivalent to God. Emptiness is another important concept in Buddhism because the ego or the concept of I is an important idea that wanting to get rid of the ego or becoming aware of the ego, and as one becomes more and more aware of the ego, then you can let go of that sense, and that as one lets go of the ego or becomes more aware of it, then at the same time one is letting go of suffering because our egos lead to much suffering. So when one empties oneself of this separate self, this ego that wants to be separate, what you replace yourself with is this fullness of the universe, of the cosmos, of interbeing. And what Thich Nhat Hanh is saying is when you are filled with everything that is beauty and interexisting, he's saying emptiness is an expression that we could say is equivalent to God. I think that's so beautiful. Buddhism is not a theistic religion, but there are theistic Buddhists and there are non-theistic Buddhists. There's absolutely room to believe or not to believe in God, because it's a believing in room for everything, and that is so beautiful to me. And I'm going to read you a metaphor for life's suffering provided by the Dalai Lama that very much resonated with me. It is from his book, How to See Yourself as You Really Are. A friend of mine lent this / gave it to me. We love those friends. Okay. A metaphor for contemplation. How are beings born from life to life similar to a bucket in a well? There are 6 similarities. Just as the bucket is bound by a rope, so are beings constrained by counterproductive emotions and actions driven by them. Just as the movement of the bucket up and down the well is run by an operator, so the process of cyclic existence is run by an untamed mind, specifically through mistakenly believing that a self exists inherently and then mistaken by the nature of mine. Just as the bucket travels up and down the well over and over, so sentient beings ceaselessly wander in the great well of cyclic existence, from the utmost states of temporary happiness to the lowest states of temporary pain. Just as it takes great exertion to draw the bucket up, but it descends easily, so beings have to expend great effort to draw themselves upward to a happier life, but easily descend into painful situations. Just as a bucket does not determine its own movements, so the factors involved in shaping a person's life are the results of past ignorance, attachments, and grasping. In the present, the same factors are continually creating more problems for our future lives, like the waves in the ocean. Just as the bucket bumps against the walls of the well when it ascends and descends, so sentient beings are battered day by day by the suffering of pain and change, and by being caught up in processes beyond their control. Apply this information about cyclic existence to yourself so that you can understand your own plight and develop a strong intention to transcend this dynamic of reoccurring problems. Why I like this metaphor of life for suffering is this picture of me being a bucket in a well that's going up and down, and I'm not the one controlling the going up and down, but just my destiny is that I go up and I go down and I get bashed back and forth, but all I can do is be present and be a bucket. And that is life. Life is, there are happy times where I am up, and then there will be sad times when I go down. And there's nothing I can do to prevent suffering and being bashed against the wall, but I can be present in it all. And in being present and letting go of trying to be happy all the time, that actually loosens the suffering, and I can find meaning and I can actually find joy in it. So that is about kindness, which actually leads us into mindfulness, which is the second part about mental discipline. So Buddha's reading recommendation for mindfulness is the Discourses on Concentrated Meditation. And our Eightfold Path pause for mental discipline, which is the second category, our steps 4, 5, and 6, are right action, right livelihood, and right effort. Those are the steps we take that fall under this category. And here are some more quotes by Thich Nhat Hanh in a different book about mindfulness. This one is written in Peace is Every Step. Incredible book about mindfulness. Here we go. We really have to understand the person we want to love. If our love is only a will to possess, it is not love. If we only think of ourselves, if we know only our own needs and ignore the needs of the other person, we can't love. We must look deeply in order to see and understand the needs, aspirations, and suffering of the person we love. What I hear in this is I think about the people in my life that are hardest to love, and I assume the worst in them, and I assume the best in me. And what this quote is saying is, well, we really have to understand the person we want to love. And the people that I really don't like, I don't fully understand them. I think I understand them, but I haven't sat down and heard their trauma. I haven't heard their full story. I haven't sat down and seen them cry. There is something about it when you see somebody break down about their hurt that your heart melts. And this part about if our love is only a will to possess, it is not love. I think about those people that really bother me, and what I want is this possession? Is this I want them to just think like me, and if they would just do what I want, that is this possessiveness. But what this quote is saying is we need to understand the needs, aspiration, and suffering of the other person. I need to sit down and be quiet, hold space, listen, and that is love. And that takes a lot of strength. And for those people that really bother me, it's okay to say, you know what, right now there's a boundary and I can't do that for you. But it's just helpful for me to recognize the humanity in those people that really bother me. That all those assumptions and all that anger, to go, oh, I don't know their full story, that they are human. And perhaps one day I will be able to sit down with them and hear their suffering. And that will help me love them. And that will also help me release all this anger. But for some people, that's not going to happen. And there will always be this discord in my life. And that is also something that I have to sit with. Here's the next quote. When you plant lettuce, if it does not grow well, you don't blame the lettuce. You look into the reasons it is not doing well. Yet if we have problems with our friends or our family, we blame the other person. Blaming has no positive effects at all. Wow, that is that is a good quote to hear, but a hard quote to apply. Because blaming is so easy to do, because it takes the responsibility off of us. And when a severe injustice has been done to you, blaming is appropriate. A concept in Buddhism is to take responsibility as much as you can, that sufferings and injustice happen to you all the time, and you can't control that. But there are things you can control, and there are things you can let go of. And I think that's what this quote is saying, that, you know, that you plant the lettuce and it doesn't grow well, there's so many external factors, that the weather and all these things that happened, and you can't control that. But you don't get mad at the lettuce, and you can get mad at the weather, but there's not a whole lot you can do to change that. So you kind of just do what you can. You make a greenhouse, you try again, and it's a letting go. That blaming the weather, blaming the lettuce is kind of futile. And they're saying that with your life, right? That there is a time to grieve for the injustices that have happened to you, because it's not your fault. And storms happen, and you didn't make it happen. But to stay angry at the storms isn't going to change anything. Eventually, we have to get up and go, well, I'm going to build a greenhouse, or I'm going to pull out the weeds, and I'm going to keep going. And our final stop on our journey is wisdom, which has been all of it, right? This is all wisdom. And Buddha's reading recommendation for wisdom is the manifest knowledge that explains the training in wisdom. And our Eightfold Path pause are the last two steps, are right mindfulness, also called bare attention, and right concentration. So let's recap. Ethical conduct involves having the right view of everything, that we are all connected, having the right intention to do no harm, and having the right speech to be kind. Mental discipline involves having the right actions and livelihood, motivated by love and not the will to possess. This requires the right effort. Lots of hard work, because it's hard. And finally, we arrive at wisdom. Being kind and loving is easy to do to the people who are like us, but it's a lot harder to do to the people who rub us the wrong way. It's also hard to do to ourselves. So mindfulness and meditation are core practices that move us to loving kindness. So meditation and mindfulness are essential in the wisdom teachings. And here are some quotes. Once again from Thich Nhat Hanh. If I am incapable of washing dishes joyfully, if I want to finish them quickly so I can go and have dessert, I will be equally incapable of enjoying my dessert. I notice this when, if I am able to enjoy the process of cooking, I can enjoy the process of eating so much more. Or in another way of saying it, this quote gives me permission that I don't just have to live my life for the weekend or live my life for the evening when I can decompress and watch TikToks and hang out in my bed. Thich Nhat Hanh says you can be aware and present for it all. You can find joy in the most mundane things, actually. You can be human all the time. That is a mind-blowing concept and very exciting. There is a word in Buddhism that means uselessness or aimlessness. The idea that you do not put something in front of you and run after it, because everything is already here in yourself. Same thing that I was saying before, that you have everything you need right now. It may not feel like that at all, but right now you are breathing and you are alive. You have air, and that is all you need. That's what Buddhism says. At least in this quote. Enlightenment, peace, and joy will not be granted by somebody else. The well is within us, and if we dig deeply in the present moment, the water will spring forth. That is so empowering. I'm going to read it again. Enlightenment, peace, and joy will not be granted by someone else. The well is within us. And if we dig deeply in the present moment, the water will spring forth. Buddhism believes that everything you need is right here in this moment. You don't need anything. You don't need to download an app. You don't need to buy a subscription. You don't need to get a book. Absolutely nothing. It's right here. Just feels good to take a moment and pause, that everything you need is here. And it's so contrary to our culture of consumerism and materialism and capitalism that says you need to buy this, you need to get this in order to be fulfilled. And Buddhism is so the opposite, that everything you have is here in you. It's always been there. And finally, this one really resonates with me. When we look at our parents with compassion, we often see that our parents are only victims who never had the chance to practice mindfulness. Wow. As a emerging adult, a struggle I've had big time is looking at my parents with judgment, struggling to have compassion for them. And this quote saying they haven't had a chance to practice mindfulness, to have to sit in silence, have this bare attention to themselves and just be, and have this acceptance and let this well that everything they need is in them. They can let that spring forth. That's just, and that thought can help bring forth compassion. All I can say is I needed to hear that quote. So those are some of my favorite quotes about wisdom and Buddhism from my favorite teachers. And that summarizes kindness, mindfulness, and wisdom, which are the three categories of the Eightfold Path that are the steps to the goal of nirvana, which being kind, being wise, and being mindful can be seen as one's road to nirvana, according to Stephen Prothero. And I hope you learned something. Completely normal that you did not absorb all of this. There was a lot of information. I did not absorb all of this. But maybe one quote stood out to you. Maybe one thing did. And that's the point. So may you have a kind, wise, and mindful day. Bye.